Hello and welcome to this week's Weekly Wind-Up with me, Alison Munro. On this week's show we have two topics plus our weekly roundup of local news. Today we will be looking at Black History Month and NHS Dentists. My guests this week are Milton Brown. Hello. And we also have an interview later with Rory Dighton from Health Watch Kirklees. Black History Month. This week we are going to be discussing Black history, its legacy and impact in Britain and on the world stage. It is 20 years since the end of apartheid in South Africa, and it is less than a year since Nelson Mandela died. He was one of the greatest statesmen the world has ever seen, who led a movement that brought an end to an unfair and unjust system, giving hope to millions of people around the world. It is vitally important that great people like Mandela are honoured as they brought about sweeping changes and broke down barriers. In order to understand the present, we must be able to appreciate the past and the immense input from African Caribbean people into British culture, from great academics, politicians, entrepreneurs, authors, athletes, jazz musicians, comedians, poets, singers, footballers, basketball players and many more. All of them changing perceptions and using their talents to change the world. This is what makes Great Britain great. The fight for recognition in society is just as important now as it was, as there are many opportunities in our society in Britain today that seem barred to many young people from certain backgrounds, especially those from African, Caribbean and minority ethnic communities. Before we hear from Milton, let's see what the people of Huddersfield know about Black History Month.
Well, it's important to everyone, you see, because it enforces their rights. So, black people with Martin Luther King and also Malcolm X. So it's very important to them.
Well, that's our history, but way back long days, a long time ago, but slave days, isn't it? And all that. But now we're free now with all that. So thank God for that.
When you don't know somebody, you don't know somebody. So it's important to look at people's history. Like far back behind, I was able to know about your history, Mungo Park and or whatever. So it's good to know about Black History Month and what Black stands for.
Black History Month is very important to all nationalities, whether black or white. It doesn't matter what you are.
So, Milton, just wondered, are you surprised about some of the answers that were given there?
No, I'm quite excited about some of the answers that were given there. Pleasantly surprised,
yeah.
but I expected people to say something on those grounds. Because, so was it 1980, 79, 80, that Black History Month has been going in this country.
Right.
It was established in America in 1926, I do believe, by a person called Carter G. Woodson. And in America, it's in February, because Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves, and Frederick Douglass' birthdays were both in February. In this country, it was set up by, I think it was Ken Livingstone, London Mayor, to celebrate black people's heritage and contribution into British society.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I have to say, I was surprised as well at how many everybody knew about it.
Yeah.
It was interesting to know that. So I just wondered, what impact has Black history had on Britain, and what is its legacy?
I guess it's hard to measure the impact because it's an ongoing year-on-year, yearly thing. So you could measure the impact with young people in school learning about Black history. You could measure the impact on interracial marriages, which is black shared and multiple heritage community is getting, well, it's one of the fastest growing ethnic groups in the country. You could if you're looking at measuring the impact on politicians in influential positions, well, hardly, right? If you're measuring the impact on black football managers, still, so it's a mixed bag of measuring the impact. And there's also lots of other social push and pull factors which influence that in lots of ways. Representation is another one. The more you see people from another culture or another community doing something, it stimulates an interest to go and find out about that person. So it's very difficult to measure the impact of Black history, but I do feel we slowly but surely going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so. And how can the promotion of Black history, culture and heritage be done? What can we do more in this country to promote it?
I guess it's a bit like all celebrations. We have Christmas, we have, well, Eid today. I'd like to say Eid Mubarak to my Muslim brothers and sisters out there. So the more we celebrate Black History Month, but I think it should be all year round, because Black history is everybody's history, as far as I'm concerned. I think it would get much more traction and much more people would know about it. And maybe talking about racial discrimination and other prejudices and injustices won't be so hard for lots of other people as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they're still going on, even though, you know, we don't really know about them as much, perhaps, but you know, you hear about cases, don't you, going to court and things, and
That's right.
you know, people in employment and things who suffer. It's quite bad, still quite bad. So do you think, well, from what you're saying, you do think Black History makes a difference, Black History Month makes a difference, and I think, you know, I think you're right. I mean, and I do think, you know, I think you're right insofar as, you know, celebrating it more often it would be a good idea, bring it much more into the fore of people's minds.
Yeah. Well, 1970, I think it was when it became a month.
Right.
And we're still
a month
celebrating a month.
Yeah.
Where I feel that as a humanitarian and people as part of the human family tree, we should be celebrating culture every day and embracing it every day. I think we do it implicitly and not realizing we do it. So we go to Chinese restaurant, Indian restaurant, African Caribbean, we do it anyway,
yes.
but I just think the celebration of it could be much more explicit.
Yeah, celebrate our differences, and you know, and you know, let's all, you know, and have respect for everybody.
The more we do, but yet there are some people who would eat the food but don't like the people, and so you see, so there's another way. If we're asking, we could measure impact.
Yeah, do you think it does come down to respect in a sense? Because if you have, you know, if you have respect for your fellow friend or your neighbour, or then you know you have a relationship automatically with them, don't you? If you're on the same level.
Yeah.
And
I think it's about knowing oneself to have respect for others.
yes.
And there's a lot of things in society that doesn't allow people or young people now to grow up and understand oneself enough. So therefore, it becomes a big challenge for them when they're pitched out into the adult world after school or studying. So there's a lot of more work to be done. I think it starts in the home. I think it starts in schools, about learning to embrace difference.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, go beyond the colour line and find out, who am I speaking to?
Yeah.
You know, what the language is, what's the culture, what's the customs, you know, what do you do on a night time? What do you do on an evening? Where do you go to enjoy yourself as a family? All of those things. I've known people who went to school with Sikh, Muslims, Hindus, Polish, Ukrainian, and don't even know how to say hello or goodbye in their language. Spent 10 years in school with them and didn't ask them, how do you say hello in your language? And these are little things I think we can do to understand people so much more and develop a confidence in oneself. And as far as Black history is concerned, it's a similar thing, because I would argue that there are still a lot of people think that Jamaica, all Black people are from Jamaica, and it's the Caribbean islands.
That's right.
Right,
Yeah.
and which most of us came from the continent of Africa, which is a continent of multiple countries. So there's lots of things I think we can do and should do, but I also feel we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, but more needs to be done. I think clearly, yeah. So what do you think we could do? What do you think we could do here in Huddersfield? What can we do more in Huddersfield? Do you think to promote it?
Well, I think the promotion of Black History Month is everybody's responsibility. But I do feel the African descent community could do much more collectively. And when I say collectively, there are some community activists out there who work tirelessly from one year to the next. But in terms of getting a collective movement from the African descent community, I think we could do so much more. I think it's hard for local authority to give the goodwill of the local authority. Money's dried up now.
Yeah.
So we have to be innovative and look at ways we can do things differently, but also have the same impact. I mean, this is what they're doing this year. It's called the Black History Month calendar October. You can get these from various outlets in the council, and there's quite a number of things that's happening this year within Huddersfield. But austerity has hit everybody, and it might take us a few years to look at how we can do things differently.
Yeah.
And maximise the impact.
How do you think Black History Month can inspire young people?
Well, I think Black History Month is certainly a time for reflection. Look at the trailblazers who gave up their lives or who gave up their lives for a better future. I think it's certainly a time to look at where we are in present. And if we look at what's happening in Syria and the migrant crisis, we can look at and find parallels from when the American and Deep South slaves got Emancipation Proclamation and traveled north. It's a similar sort of thing. And I think if we look to the future, it can inspire young people in looking at what people can achieve with determination, motivation and resilience. And hope for a better life. So, and that belongs to everybody. It's not solely and exclusively for Black people, but I think it belongs to everybody. So that's how it could inspire young people, families, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers. It can inspire anyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Milton. That's been very interesting. Thank you. Right, now it is time for some local news from our area. Huddersfield examined the 22nd of September. Fate of dozens of Kirklees library staff sealed as a radical shake-up plan approved. The fate of dozens of library workers has been sealed after councillors reluctantly agreed to a huge cost-cutting shake-up. Kirklees Council's cabinet members have approved the plan to fully control only 8 of its current 26 libraries and to vastly slash opening hours. The decision means some 88 full-time roles will go, possibly more than 100 employees as many hold part-time positions. The council will support communities to run a further 16 small libraries, with 1 member of paid staff on hand to advise volunteers. But the axe has come down on 2 libraries, Thornhill Lees and Lepton, which will close in April 2016. The 6 vehicle strong mobile library service will also go as it's deemed poor value for money. Join us after the break when we will be talking about NHS Dentists. Remember, the weekly wind-up can be contacted by email at info@kirkleeslocaltv.com or on Twitter at the weekly wind-up and on Facebook.
However large or small your business, attracting new customers requires dedication and a lot of patience. Just like fishing, but you also need the right gear. Rods,
reels, lines, hooks, sinkers, lures,
tackle box, tackle bag, net, bait, gas gloves, clothes, pocket knife, lunch.
Or you could simply advertise with KLTV. Online, grow your business and your clientele. KLTV, your vision made reality. Should have gone to KLTV.
Welcome back. But before we talk about NHS Dentists, we have some more news from Kirklees. News: Huddersfield Examiner, 18th of September. Huddersfield Junk Food Project launched to end food poverty in Huddersfield. A campaign to end food poverty in Huddersfield using surplus food has been launched. Doreen Reid is already delivering food to vulnerable people and is to start a project with the university. Doreen is already getting local supermarkets, Sainsbury's and Morrison's to donate their unwanted stock to her new Huddersfield Real Junk Food Project and is being helped by 12 volunteers. Doreen has also turned her attention to feeding Huddersfield students and has linked up with University of Huddersfield Student Union to launch a weekly pay as you feel lunch. I was on a low income when my daughter went to university and know that some students are up to their eyeballs in debt because of living costs. I talked to student executives Alicia Ford and Susie Crossley, and they were happy to set something up. So from October 1st, we will use university kitchens to make lunches, then serve it up in the main plaza on a pay-as-you-feel basis. Now we're going to move on to dentistry in Kirklees. Earlier, I spoke with Rory Dighton from Health Watch Kirklees. Earlier this year, it was reported in Huddersfield Examiner that a local watchdog health group have claimed there is a distinct lack of NHS dentists in Kirklees, causing patients to attend emergency services at HRI. A survey has been carried out by staff at HRI and found the majority of people attending were not classed as emergencies and were attending because they couldn't afford a private dentist and or couldn't find a local NHS provider. Some of the patients were children who had no NHS dentists. We went and asked the people of Huddersfield what they thought about NHS dentists.
I think they're exceptionally good in Kirklees. I've lived in Kirklees all my life, or the county borough of Huddersfield, and we've always had good dentists. You know, I've moved around different areas. I've never had any trouble being able to, get into a dental practice, which some people say they do have. Yeah. And I come to one in the centre of town now. Fabulous. It's wonderful.
There's not enough, and I've been trying for 10 days. I've got a broken wisdom tooth. I'm in a lot of pain and I can't get through to a dentist to get it seen to.
So I'd like to welcome Rory Dighton from local Health Watch Kirklees today to talk about some of the issues that are being faced with the NHS dental crisis in this area. So Rory, welcome to the show. Do you know why there is a shortage of NHS dentists in Kirklees?
Well, in theory, there shouldn't be a shortage. There are 30 or 40 dentists in Kirklees with NHS contracts. The issue comes from getting access to those dentists, and those NHS contracts control very strictly access to their NHS lists. So instead of being able to access any of those 40 NHS dentists, imagine if you were looking for a GP, we would be able to go walking 5 miles in any direction here from Huddersfield, and we'd be able to find 2, 3, 4, 5 GPs who would take us on. We can't do that with an NHS dentist. We don't know, there isn't an easy way to find out who's taking on NHS patients. There isn't an easy way to make an appointment, and we think that's wrong. We think that leads to health inequalities. We think that it penalises people who are less resilient and less prepared to ring up 7 or 8 different dentists in order to get an appointment.
Interesting. And so is it simply the case that dental practices really just want to do private work?
I don't know. NHS dentists are all of the contracts, bar 1 or 2 in Kirklees, are run by private organisations. They are NHS dentists are private profit-making organisations, and they make more money out of private dentistry, and we recognise that. And that's, you know, that's okay. I think as long as patients are getting a good deal, we make no judgment at all about the position of private organisations in the NHS. That's not what we're talking about. I think what we are concerned about is the extent to which dentists control access to their NHS contract. So it should be easy for patients to ring up, to call, to know where they can go to find an NHS dentist. And it's just not the case there. If you look on NHS Choices, the online resource, you should be able to find all of the dentists that are taking on patients in Kirklees at the moment. And of the 40 that there are, less than 5, and I'd say perhaps 1 or 2 are currently advertising themselves as taking on patients. The bits that we really don't like are when NHS dentists advertise that they are taking on new patients and then say, well, I'll take you on if you like, or I'll take your children on if you come and join us privately. And that we feel is uncomfortable. We don't think it's fair.
No.
So we're looking for transparency. It should be easy to look in one place and find out exactly where I can get NHS treatment in Kirklees.
It should be. Yeah. So who are these policies impacting on? Who in our society is suffering, from your findings as a result of these practices?
I'd look at 2 specific groups of people. Firstly, the less resilient, the more vulnerable people, the people who aren't prepared to make 7 or 8 phone calls to find an NHS dentist, are the people who just give up and end up with much more serious tooth decay problems than they perhaps otherwise would have had. I think people on lower incomes as well. If the only dentist, if you're living in Huddersfield and the only dentist you can find is based in Dewsbury or in Leeds, then actually your ability to travel to that NHS dentist is significantly less. And the last group that we're really concerned about are younger people. We think that younger people are being specifically disadvantaged by this. We spent some time in an unplanned dental clinic at Christmas this year, talking to people who turned up in those clinics because they couldn't get help elsewhere, and the percentages of younger people in those clinics, nearly 60% of the people in those clinics were what we would class as younger people.
That's terrible.
And we think that when you move to a new area or when you move out of the family home, that's when you're looking for a new dentist and you just can't find them at all. So we're specifically interested at how these policies are impacting on younger people.
And of course young people probably don't have that kind of money to dish out on private dentistry either, because they're trying to make their own way in life, and they won't have those kind of incomes that can support private dental health, I would imagine.
Absolutely the case. I think sometimes young people don't want the sort of service that NHS dentists are offering as well. They don't necessarily want to be registered and to go in every 6, 12, 18 months for a checkup. They want to access a service when they need it. So I think that being called back in, if you go in for a checkup, a normal checkup, it'll cost you about £18. So the NHS will pay will pay part of that cost of treatment, and you will pay part of that cost of treatment, and it will cost you about £18.50. And young people perhaps don't want to be spending that every 12 months. So, and I think we should be building NHS services based around what people want to access and what people need, as opposed to what private contractors want to deliver.
Yeah, it seems there's a big discrepancy between what the dentists actually want to deliver and actually what people want. They're not meeting in the middle.
No, I would agree.
So we hear a lot about missed appointments. Do you think they're impacting on? Do they impact on what's what currently happening in dental practices? People turned away if they miss an appointment, for example, or.
I don't think missed appointments is a big issue. I don't think that's causing problems in the system.
Right.
I think there is an issue in people who do miss an appointment and get knocked off their dentist's NHS list, and we've heard a lot of that. And I think there's a difference between somebody who misses 3 or 4 appointments and doesn't come and leaves the dentist out of pocket and it messes up their business. And, you know, I would totally understand that. But we heard from one only a few weeks ago, and somebody had missed 1 appointment because they were ill and they were knocked off that NHS list. And again, we don't feel that's fair. We don't feel that's equitable. We think there needs to be a degree of understanding and a degree of flexibility, because once you're off that NHS list, it's really hard to find a new one.
Yeah, it seems to me that there seems to be some kind of regulations need to be imposed, you know, so that it's more controllable, you know, from everybody's point of view, basically, so that, you know, everybody knows what the rules are, and if you stick to those rules, then, you know, could dentists be regulated in that way?
I think one of the real issues is around the contract that the NHS has with these private dentists, and the extent to which that contract is regulated.
Yeah.
And NHS England, who are based in Leeds, who contract for dentists in the Kirklees area. So it's not the fault of the council, it's not the fault of the local CCGs, the clinical commissioning groups. This is NHS England, an organisation based in Leeds who contract for NHS dentistry in our area. And they don't have the resource to properly manage these dental contracts. And they're a shrinking organisation. Resources have been put into the front line of the NHS. Yes. And unfortunately, this is one of the areas where we recognise, you know, they are upfront and open with this, that quite often they don't have the resource or the ability to go in and properly manage those contracts. Yeah. I think that the contract itself is just wrong, doesn't work in the best interests of patients. No. And when the new national contract, and there'll be a national contract for NHS dentistry, when that is renegotiated, that's the point at which we really need to make sure that we don't get another contract where you can't ask dentists to work in slightly different ways, and patients get a better deal from it all. We have a situation where if you walked into a hospital and you were looking for A&E, there would be signposts up there. You'd be able to find exactly where you needed to go.
Yeah.
For NHS dentistry, that signposting isn't there, and patients don't know where to go. And there's an inequality of access as a result of that.
We spoke briefly earlier, and you mentioned something about the funding in Kirklees its funding is going in certain areas and leaving out other areas. Is that something that Kirklees Council could be lobbied on? Is that?
No, again, it's nothing to do with the council. It comes back to this contract and this national contract.
Yeah.
We spend 10 times as much in certain parts of Kirklees as we do in others. There are wards in Kirklees, 3 wards in Kirklees that don't have any NHS dentists at all. We spend 10 times as much in parts of Huddersfield as we do in parts of Dewsbury. And we also know that the oral health in North Kirklees is some of the worst in the area. So we know that the oral health is the worst, and yet we're still spending less money there. Area, yeah. And that, again, is because of the contract. The contract is set up in a way where we can't move money around the system. The NHS can't move money around the system. We should be taking money out of Huddersfield and putting it into North Kirklees. We shouldn't be spending 10 times as much money in one part of our area as another.
What advice could you give to people who are currently seeking an NHS dentist? I mean, basically phone, contact, was it the 111 number?
So NHS 111,
yes.
The telephone number should be your first port of call, and they should carry a list of NHS practices who are currently accepting NHS patients in our area, and that should be a starting point. What we would say from our experience is don't just ring up the first dentist, ring up the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one, and then the fifth one, until you get on to a list. Don't be fobbed off. It's about being resilient, and it's about going through the system and working hard to try and find your NHS dentist.
Okay. thank you to my guest, Rory Dighton. We recorded that interview earlier today. So Milton, just wondered if you could just give me some thoughts, your thoughts on the current crisis with the NHS dental practices.
Well, I remember I'm a 60s youth, and honest, we never had a problem going to the dentist. Every 6 weeks or 6 months we go in. I don't have a problem with my dentist. I'm with a dentistry around the corner. But I'm really surprised that it would appear by your interview with Rory there that the private sector is actually running the dentistry where the NHS should be the dominant person within, or the dominant organisation within that partnership. So I'm really shocked. I don't know how it's going to be sorted unless the NHS, or dentistry is nationalised again, and taken back into the NHS. But it's worrying. It's worrying, and you'll get certain people. I mean, I don't even like going to the dentist, but I go. But it's a great excuse for people not going if they don't like the dentist, because they can't find a suitable practice to go. And it would also appear that if you move from one area to another, then you're right at the bottom of this list again. When back in the day, wherever you went, you could get hold of a dental practice and go in. Oh no, it's concerning.
It is, I think so. I think definitely it needs an overhaul. The whole system needs overhauling. So I think it's right to just, kind of know about it and find out what's going on. It's now time for our last news story from Kirklees, the Huddersfield Examiner. This was reported on the 23rd of September. Project Paddington. Youngsters donate their favourite teddy bears to Syrian refugees. Youngsters in the Home Valley are giving up their beloved teddy bears to send to Syrian refugee children. Project Paddington, set up in Sheffield, has been brought to Hepworth by mums Lisa Bradley and Lynette McHale. Children at Hepworth Junior and Infant School and the preschool were the first to donate their teddies. Mum of two, Lisa, said the inspiration for the appeal came from her son Tommy, who's 7, who wanted to do something to help. Tommy has donated his 2 favourite teddies, Digby and Squirrel, and all the money he was saving for an Xbox Lego game. His little brother Oscar, 4, wasn't to be outdone and will send his favourite Gruffalo toy. I am really proud of them both, and we hope these teddies will be the first of many that we will send to the refugees. It is really good for the children to show compassion and think about others. The idea behind Project Paddington is for children to write notes to send with the teddies, and Lisa said, it's all about children helping children. The campaign was started on Facebook in Sheffield by trainee vicar Joy French, who's 39, and has now spread across the UK. For more information, find Project Paddington on Facebook or ring Lisa on 07900 982 429. So that's it from this week's Weekly Wind-Up. I want to thank my guests for joining me here. Thank you, Milton, and thank you again to Rory. And thank you to all for watching this week's show. Please remember the Weekly Wind-Up can be contacted by email at info@kirkleeslocaltv.com or on Twitter @The Weekly Wind-Up. And we can also be found on Facebook. Thank you and goodbye.